Ukraine waited for Putin's Christmas travel rush and struck in the one moment Moscow was least prepared. At 19:06 p.m., a violent burst tore through the western edge of Sheremetyevo Airport, sending a plume of fire 240 feet into the air and triggering a thermal spike surpassing 1,950 degrees Celsius. Ground sensors recorded a pressure shock equal to 1.6 tons of explosive energy, powerful enough to freeze every runway operation across 6.4 kilometers. Within seconds, fuel trucks toppled, cargo pallets flipped like paper, and a glare brighter than the terminal floodlights washed over more than 57,000 holiday travelers who had no idea the strike originated from inside their own city. But what happened on that apron was only the final frame of an operation engineered across 38 hours, 10 coordinated drones, and a perfectly timed holiday distraction. Before we continue, if you saw that fireball rise during Christmas travel, what's the first explanation that would cross your mind? 19:06 p.m., northern Moscow. A hard winter haze hovered over 48 square kilometers of terminals, fuel depots, and frozen service roads. Sheremetyevo Airport, Russia's busiest holiday hub, was choking under a surge of 57,400 passengers, 1,982 staff, and 312 active flights. Baggage belts groaned under 410 tons of luggage. The city's radar net scanned more than 2,700 civilian transponders within a 40-mile radius. No one imagined that Ukraine had already infiltrated a weapon into this grid, one smaller than a motorcycle, yet capable of crippling an entire air corridor. 7 miles from the runway, under a dim sodium lamp, a Gazelle delivery van sat on the edge of a snow-packed service road. A cartoon Santa smiled from its side panel, blending into the parade of over 16,000 seasonal delivery vehicles recorded moving through Moscow that week. But beneath the plywood floor lay no toys. A sealed compartment housed 10 autonomous drones, total weight 86 kilograms, each powered by lithium packs capable of sustaining 28 minutes of high-load flight. Their internal diagnostics flashed green, GPS mask navigation array calibrated, thermal shielding stable at -14 degrees Celsius, collision avoidance vision module 97% accuracy, launch vector tolerance plus or minus 0.4 degrees. They were cheap, disposable, but together they carried more destructive potential per dollar than any weapon in the city. For 38 hours and 22 minutes, the Santa van drifted through holiday chaos so thick that even Moscow's AI-driven surveillance lattice, normally analyzing 260 million data points per day, failed to detect the false chassis. Security checkpoints designed to flag inconsistencies in under 0.8 seconds were now running at 51% overload, letting anything with a holiday manifest pass unquestioned. At 19:06:17 p.m., the deception ended. A 12-volt motor clicked. The roof slid open by 42 centimeters. Cold air rushed in as 10 drones rose, synchronized, silent, and already locked onto a path that would turn Moscow's holiday glow into something far more dangerous than snow and lights. 19:06:43 p.m. The swarm had barely climbed above the tree line when Moscow's air defense lattice stirred. 9 kilometers west of Sheremetyevo, inside a reinforced cabin lined with 3.8 tons of sensor equipment, the radar of a Panzer's 1 battery registered something unusual. 6 faint echoes, each no larger than a bird, but moving at a precise 38 meters per second. The operator, a 26-year-old lieutenant finishing his third 14-hour shift of the holiday week, frowned. His interface, normally analyzing 14,000 surface air tracks per minute, flagged the signatures as low risk, altitude 27 meters, cross-section under 0.01 square meters. It looked like a swarm of hobbyist drones wandering too close to restricted airspace. Still, he tapped engage. 1 missile, value $210,000, ignited, burning 18 kilograms of propellant in under 4 seconds. At Mach 2.8, it intercepted the first drone. The screen flashed a small burst icon. Target resolved. What he didn't know, what no one on the Russian side yet understood, was that this target was the cheapest, most disposable piece of a much larger operation. The destruction was not a win. It was the opening trigger. Instantly, the remaining drones executed a pre-programmed shift. Their digital links severed in 0.07 seconds, placing them into blackout mode. No uplink, no telemetry, only inertial navigation, AI vision mapping, and a cloned flight corridor based on a civilian departure path recorded 6 minutes earlier. To the Pantsir's receivers, the drones vanished, gone from the radio spectrum as if erased. But invisibility alone would never be enough. A deeper illusion had to be created, and the next move would push the air defense network into a trap far more intricate than a simple radar glitch. Before we continue, if you were watching that screen and 6 objects suddenly disappeared mid-flight, what would you think happened? Tell me below. Chapter 3 will reveal how Ukraine turned vanished targets into the perfect digital decoy, and why Moscow's defenses made the exact mistake Kyiv needed. 19:07:02 p.m. For a brief instant, Moscow's Western air defense grid believed it had achieved local control. 1 drone eliminated, 5 presumed wandering, but the vanishing act had only set the stage for a far deeper intrusion, one engineered to overwhelm logic itself. 900 meters above the frozen river basin, Baba Yaga Unit 2 activated its core payload. Not explosives, data. A high-gain emitter, barely the size of a matchbox, pulsed at 7.2 watts, broadcasting a synthetic radar signature identical to the missing FPVs. Except these echoes were larger, clearer, drifting upward at a steady 1.3 meters per second, and tracking along a harmless vector that led away from the airport. The shift was immediate. The Pantsir's fire control computer, processing 42 million micro-calculations per second, recalibrated its threat priority. The new targets appeared more stable, more predictable. Exactly the type of behavior the system was trained to pursue. Within 0.41 seconds, lock-on transferred to the Phantom group, and the real drones slipped deeper under the radar horizon. But this was only half of the maneuver. 7 kilometers south, Baba Yaga Unit 3 unleashed a narrowband burst of digital interference. 22 watts of concentrated noise tuned precisely to the X-band frequency of the second Pantsir battery. The disruption lasted just 5.6 seconds, but it was enough. The entire radar panel froze, unable to refresh its scan cycles. For the first time in 11 months, that battery went momentarily blind. With one system deceived and the other stunned, the swarm gained a corridor less than 94 meters wide, a temporary void in Moscow's overlapping defenses. Through that corridor, 6 autonomous units advanced at 92 miles per hour, hugging the treetops so tightly that their thermal signatures blended into the ambient ground temperature. To the tracking algorithms, they resembled nothing more than cold terrain noise. Yet hidden beneath this tactical brilliance was a fatal consequence. The deception required high-power emissions, spikes bright enough for long-range sensors to catch. And 55 miles north, the most dangerous sensor of all had already begun rotating toward the anomaly. The S-400 gravestone radar, capable of detecting a fighter jet at 380 kilometers, had found something unusual. 4 distinct signals, coherent, stable, and betraying the unmistakable signature of advanced electronic systems hovering low over Moscow's outskirts. The next chapter would decide everything. 19:07:31 p.m. The moment the spoofing pulse left Baba Yaga Unit 2 and the jamming burst radiated from Unit 3, a new actor entered the battlefield, one far beyond the Pantsir's reach. 88 kilometers north, the 92 N6E gravestone radar of an S-400 regiment completed its 8th rotation cycle and registered a cluster of signatures unlike anything in its database. Unlike short-range systems that scan a narrow bubble, the S-400 watches an area the size of a small country, 410,000 square kilometers of sky, terrain, and electromagnetic clutter. It processes 1.2 billion signal samples per minute, filtering noise, isolating anomalies, and elevating anything with predictive coherence. And tonight, 4 emissions stood out like flares in darkness. The radar ignored the drifting phantom echoes, too inconsistent. It dismissed the low-altitude noise, too faint. Instead, it locked onto the synchronized outputs of the Baba Yagas: steady frequency, stable modulation, coordinated timing. To the gravestone's logic tree, these weren't drones. They resembled forward-deployed electronic nodes, the same category as airborne jammers or control relays. Targets assigned the highest priority. In 0.19 seconds, the system classified them as Class 3 strategic emitters. In 0.08 seconds more, firing authorization populated across the tactical screen. 2 40N6E long-range interceptors, each with a reach of 380 kilometers and a warhead weighing nearly 180 kilograms, were cued by the launch algorithm. The operators didn't hesitate. At 19:07:33 p.m., hydraulic clamps released. 2 launch tubes snapped open. Propellant charges ignited with a glare visible over 11 kilometers away. Twin contrails stabbed upward, accelerating at forces exceeding 20 G. For the swarm, this was the point where strategy met physics. If the missiles reached their projected intercept point, the command layer of the operation would collapse instantly. The remaining drones, now deep inside the flight corridor, would lose all coordination, and Moscow's defenses would reawaken. 19:07:41 p.m. The 2 S-400 interceptors were already climbing past 1,200 meters, their guidance arrays squeezing 18.4 million radar returns per second into a single firing solution. The trajectory was brutal in its efficiency. Both missiles would converge on the Baba Yaga formation in 14.2 seconds, detonating with enough force to disrupt a 3-kilometer radius of sky. For the swarm, there was no time to evade. No maneuver could outrun a weapon traveling at Mach 6.2. Survival required something far more radical, rewriting the threat's perception itself. Baba Yaga Unit 4, flying at 46 meters altitude, initiated its final protocol. 2 plasma cartridges ignited beneath its chassis, each burning at over 2,300 degrees Celsius, releasing an electromagnetic flare so dense it expanded the drone's apparent radar signature by a factor of 12. Simultaneously, 6 thermal decoys, modified to burn at 1,900 to 2,100 degrees Celsius, were expelled in a staggered line, forming a corridor of heat bright enough to saturate the gravestone radar's upper registers. The physics were merciless. Within 0.92 seconds, the S-400's target hierarchy recalculated. The 4 faint emitters it had been tracking collapsed into irrelevance. The new signal, an enormous incandescent bloom measuring over 240 meters in apparent width, overrode every previous threat assignment. The missile logic switched instantly. Interceptors veered off their original course, curving toward the artificial furnace created by Unit 4. 8 seconds later, both warheads triggered prematurely at 7,800 meters, producing nothing but a distant flash against the winter haze. The cost of that deception was anonymity. Unit 4's signature burned too brightly. Its decoys traced a path that would lead enemy sensors back to its last known vector. But the window it purchased, an 18-second corridor of total confusion, was priceless. Ahead, the remaining FPV units descended into their terminal approach, accelerating toward the airfield's western threshold. The strike phase had officially begun. 19:07:59 p.m. With the S-400 momentarily diverted and the Panzer network still digesting phantom tracks, the 6 FPV units entered the most dangerous stretch of the mission. A straight-line corridor just 612 meters wide, bordered on both sides by hard radar reflections from hangars, fuel lines, and maintenance cranes. Any deviation greater than 1.4 degrees would push them into search beams, capable of reacquiring them in under 0.6 seconds. But the drones were already past the point where operators mattered. Each craft relied entirely on its internal stack, 42,000 inertial updates per second, a tri-camera vision array mapping features down to 7.3 centimeters, and a predictive flight model built from 11.2 gigabytes of harvested civilian departure data. Their altitude never exceeded 13.8 meters. At ground level, their signatures blended into the ambient thermal noise radiating from runway tarmac heated earlier in the day to -2 degrees Celsius above background. On most nights, that margin meant nothing. Tonight, it made them indistinguishable from the environment itself. 90 seconds earlier, an Aeroflot flight had lifted off runway 24R. The FPVs now locked themselves into that exact climb vector, replicating it with a precision margin under 0.03%. Merging their motion into a pattern Moscow's airspace controllers had already cleared as non-threatening. At 19:08:12 p.m., the convoy broke past the final radar shelf. Ahead of them lay the airfield's inner zone, 14 fuel trucks, 3 ammunition loaders, and 6 aircraft preparing for rotation cycles. Among these silhouettes, the system identified its objective, an IL-76 airframe, parked on stand D-47, flanked by auxiliary carts emitting thermal signatures, consistent with pre-flight charging operations. The FPVs fanned out. 5 leveled their trajectory. 1, Unit 6, dropped altitude by 4 meters, angling into a terminal descent profile calculated to exploit the weakest structural point of the target's left wing route. Behind them, the defensive grid was beginning to reset. When the smoke finally thinned over the airfield and the flames retreated into twisted metal, the real impact of the operation moved far beyond the crater on stand D-47. Moscow's Holiday Air Bridge collapsed for days, logistics chains shuttered across 3 regions, and frontline units found themselves short of the supplies they had counted on. A strike executed by machines no heavier than a toolbox had reshaped an entire week of the war, with precision measured not in miles, but in seconds. And in that quiet aftermath, one truth stood taller than the fire column itself. Modern conflict no longer belongs only to armies. It belongs to whoever can think faster, move quieter, and exploit the blind spots a giant never sees coming. If you were in command of a team designing the next covert strike, what disguise would you choose, and why? Tell me below.